There's nothing new about forage harvesting, though to listen to some you might think there was. While most of us find foraging is quite routine, others are dogged by delays and breakdowns. So why do some farmers cope well while others suffer? To find out, let's remind ourselves of the basic techniques of forage harvesting. With tidy symmetrical windrows and no sharp corners, this field should be quite straightforward. But however simple the job may seem, it's always worth spending time on selected preparatory tasks before you start work. So let's remind ourselves of the points it pays to check. Even on a well-maintained tractor, the engine and cooling, lubrication and fuel reserves should be checked daily. The engine oil level on this tractor has already been topped up, so now it's just a question of making sure that the fuel tank is full for the day ahead. Foraging is done at near maximum power, so the 103 horsepower engine of this 7610 will need all the air it can get. To burn the fuel injected at maximum engine speed, it will need about 360 cubic feet of air every minute. The radiator and transmission oil cooler areas must be free of straw and dust. Before doing any heavy work, it's always worth checking the main air cleaner element. The brakes are equally important. For safe transport and hillside work, make sure they're equally adjusted. You can couple them together later before you move off. Tire pressures are worth examining too. On a day like today, 18 psi will be about right. If the tires are too hard, the tractor may skid. The water ballast can be left in. On this tractor, it's about a 75% front wheel fill, enough to provide some useful stability when you're working on a slope. For the same reason, the front weights can be left as they are. The next thing to look at is the clevis drawbar. You may need to release the pickup hitch locking hooks. Check the adjustment of the drawbar in the frame, and if necessary, reposition with the special locating pins. The drawbar pin to PTO shaft distance should be set at the standard 1000 speed setting of 400 millimeters. That's 16 inches. For the forage harvester they're about to use here, the power takeoff shaft must be changed. The 540 shaft must be replaced by the 1000 speed one to match the high power forage harvester and to allow full torque and over 80 shaft horsepower to be safely transferred to the foraging machinery. If it's not changed, transferring high power output at 540 RPM could easily overstress the PTO shaft. So it's wise to use the higher speed PTO shaft for all higher power operations. You'll find most high output machines are designed for 1000 shaft speed input. Now it's time to make sure the tractor's lower links, which are not used in forage harvesting, are securely fastened by using a linkage bar and the retaining chains. When you do this, make sure the chains are properly adjusted so the lower links don't flop about, making a noise or fouling the tires. Make sure you hold the lower links at a convenient height to avoid fouling the PTO shaft or the drawbar of the harvester. In position control, providing the hydraulic quadrant remains where it is, the lower links will always stay in the same position. Before you finish with the tractor, check the track width. This one is set at 72 inches, just as it came off the plough, and that's about right for forage harvesting. Any narrower could affect stability. The wheel nuts are worth checking too. New wheel nuts often need to be tightened several times in the first few weeks of a tractor's life. Now let's look at the forage harvester. Here again, a few minutes spent checking at this stage can prevent a lot of trouble later. The first thing to do is to make sure the gearbox oil levels are correct. If you're not familiar with the type of forage harvester you're going to use, don't forget the handbook. It will show you what to look for and exactly where it is. The pickup tines and skids need a quick check. If they're worn or broken, they'll need replacing. The feed rollers, which are next in line after the pickup mechanism, must be cleaned too, and always make sure they're correctly tensioned. On this harvester, they've already dealt with the cutter head, carefully resharpening and resetting the knives to 1/10,000th of an inch from the shear bar, so the grass will be cleanly chopped and power will not be wasted. Before you attach a harvester to a tractor for the first time in the season, make sure the slip clutch hasn't seized during the winter. If you reduce the clutch spring pressures and then deliberately block the feed mechanism, you'll find that you can free the clutch by simultaneously rotating the drive shaft. A couple of turns is usually enough. You can then remove the obstruction and reset the spring length to the manufacturer's recommendations. Before you start work, and every day when you're working, don't forget the grease points. Pressure of about 45 psi is about right. If the pressure is too low and you make an unwise turn or hit an unexpected bump, you could turn the machine over. You can now bring the tractor and harvester together. But while doing so, make sure the harvester drawbar isn't arranged with a clevis coupling. If the tractor has got one, the implement doesn't need one too. As you know, attaching an implement can be a two-man job, but it's one you can do perfectly safely on your own, provided you follow a few common-sense rules. It's always worth remembering that a coupling has to work at least 4 different ways: up, down, and sideways, so it must be secure and free of obstruction. When the pin has been secured, you can check the drawbar for level and alignment. You can then swing the drawbar jack into the horizontal position and give yourself more room to work in. With the 1000 speed PTO shaft already fitted, coupling up the harvester is quite straightforward. But here too, though the job is simple enough, there are points it pays to check. Points like the maximum and minimum length of the PTO shaft and the PTO shaft guard. Is there enough movement for easy coupling and enough overlap for any dips and turns? A quick pull ensures the spring-loaded plunger has engaged with the safety recess. Now you can turn your attention to the hydraulic hose connections needed to operate the harvester's pickup hitch. After moving the spool valve coupler lever up, the spool valve control lever in the cab should be moved to the float position, so you can engage the coupler even if there is back pressure in the line. While you're at the back end, check the electrics and make sure the harvester power supply and signal cables are properly routed and supported so they don't flap around. With the unit securely coupled, you can give the equipment a trial run at low engine revs to make sure all is well. Now you're almost ready to start work. But before you move off, it's worth taking a final walk round the whole outfit. Check the drawbar and the trailer hitch, and don't forget the trailer brake coupling. When you're sure you're safely coupled up, you can move away. Foot brakes locked together. 6th gear selected. 4-wheel drive disengaged for the road, and with a moderate throttle setting, you can be on your way. Now you can begin to reap the benefit of the checks you've carried out. As you've made sure everything is in good order before you start, your progress is unlikely to be delayed by unexpected breakdowns. In 4-wheel drive, with low dual power selected, you can adjust the engine speed to 1200 RPM and feather in the PTO. As you lower the pickup reel, check the clearance of the tines in case the skid attachment needs adjustment. Satisfied with your machinery, now it's in motion, you can engage a suitable low gear and open the throttle to achieve almost full engine speed. Finally, it's on with the metal detector and into the crop. You don't need to start working flat out. Pick a speed which will enable you to see how the pickup tines are working, how the feed auger and rollers are coping, and whether the grass is or isn't ending up in the trailer. When you're satisfied on all counts, you can use the dual power switch to increase ground speed and at the same time open the last half-inch of throttle to get full engine power. Your thorough preparations are already producing results. As you work on, use your intuition and experience to check the power and output. Listen to the engine, assessing its speed and the power in reserve. Watch the drive shaft, looking for any unusual vibrations, and check the grass input. At just on 2,100 engine revs, this tractor is using 100 horsepower. With new fuel injectors, there's very little smoke, and that situation will continue if the injectors are serviced every 600 hours. At full throttle, uphill, and at 2,000 revs, the engine's torque is impressive. Using the dual power switch, you can make smooth, clutchless, on-the-move speed changes to match the density of the crop. When you're working in a field like this one, which is much steeper on one side than it is on the other, you need to be constantly aware of what the ground is like underfoot. If it's very damp, leave the steeper ground until it dries. Even when it's dry, you may find it's worth enlisting some help so you don't have all the weight of the forager and the trailer on one tractor. You may need to work a little slower to make sure you can maintain your stability if the ground proves rough. So when all is said and done, there's nothing very complicated about forage harvesting. People run into trouble simply because they fail to consider the points we've explored. Today, the range of Ford tractor applications is almost unlimited. But wherever you work and whatever equipment you use, you'll find that to go by the book produces the best possible results. Thorough groundwork means good results, and discerning operators like to keep it that way.